I didn't see him get in. That's the part I still can't explain without my stomach tightening, even now, even with daylight in the window and a normal road under the tires. One moment I was alone, the next there was the subtle shift of weight behind me, like the car had accepted an extra passenger and hadn't bothered to tell me. It was late, past the hour when gas stations feel like islands and every mile between them feels longer than it should. I'd been driving home from a friend's place out in the country, taking the back route because the highway construction had turned the main road into a line of brake lights. My phone sat in its mount, the GPS talking softly in that polite, emotionless way, and my heater pushed lukewarm air that smelled faintly like dust. I remember glancing at the rearview mirror because I thought I saw something move in the back seat. At first it was just darkness, then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw the shape of a person sitting behind the passenger seat. He wasn't hunched or slumped like a tired rider. He sat perfectly upright, hands folded in his lap, as if he'd been there the whole time, and this was just where he belonged. I hit the brakes so hard the seatbelt locked across my chest. The car swerved slightly, tires whispering on the damp road, and I steadied it with both hands, heart rattling in my ribs. I looked again. The shape didn't move. I told myself it was my jacket thrown over the seat. A shadow. A trick of the headrests and the streetlights I'd passed. But there hadn't been streetlights in miles. The only light was mine. I forced my eyes forward and kept driving, trying to breathe like a normal person. My brain did that thing it always does when it's scared. It tried to rationalize the impossible until it sounded stupid. You're tired. It's dark. You're seeing shapes. Then the figure spoke. Keep your speed steady. The voice was low and calm, not threatening, not friendly, just certain, like a rule being read out loud. Every hair on my arms lifted. I didn't answer. I couldn't. In the mirror, the face was wrong in a way I can't describe cleanly. It wasn't rotten, it wasn't skeletal. It wasn't anything dramatic like movies. It was plain, smooth, almost gentle, like a face that had never been under strain because it had never needed to feel anything. And the eyes, dark and reflective, like wet stones, weren't fixed on me. They were fixed on the road ahead, through me. My mouth finally worked. Who are you? He didn't look up. You know. I swallowed. No, I don't. A beat of silence passed, filled only by the tires and the faint hiss of the heater. Then he said, You've called me by different names. My hands went cold on the wheel. I laughed once because the alternative was screaming. Okay, fine. What do you want? Nothing, he said. I don't want. The car drifted slightly. I corrected too fast, and the headlights flashed across the trees on the roadside. They looked closer than before, like the road had narrowed. I'm just here, he continued, like he was explaining something obvious. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. Why are you in my car? To make sure you arrive, he said. That should have been comforting. It wasn't, because the way he said arrive didn't sound like getting home. It sounded like reaching an end. I tried to glance away from the mirror and focus on the road, but the road had changed. It was the same asphalt, the same painted lines, but the fog that had been patchy earlier had thickened into a low white blanket that crawled over the ditches and up into my headlights. The GPS voice, cheerful and robotic, said, Continue for 7 miles. 7 miles. I'd taken this road 100 times. 7 miles should have put me near the old bridge, the one with the rusted beams and the river below. But I'd already been driving longer than that. Something's wrong, I said, more to myself than him. Things are always wrong, he replied. Then he tilted his head just slightly. You're thinking about the bridge. My throat tightened. How do you... You don't have to say it, he said. You're loud. I gripped the wheel harder until my knuckles hurt. If you're what I think you are, why now? He paused as if considering whether the answer mattered. Because tonight, he said finally, you were going to be alone when it happened. My stomach turned. I stared at the fog ahead, at the pale tunnel it made, and I said very carefully, what's going to happen? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached forward with one hand and touched the back of the passenger seat. His fingers were long, clean, almost delicate. When his fingertips made contact, the temperature in the car dropped. Not like the heater failed, like the air itself had been removed and replaced with colder air from somewhere deeper. Steady, he reminded me. The fog thickened into something almost solid. And then, in the center of the road ahead, my headlights hit a shape. A deer, no, too tall. A person standing in the lane. My heart slammed. I hit the brakes hard and the tires squealed. The figure didn't move and it didn't flinch. It stood there as the car skidded closer, and in the split second before impact, my headlights filled its face. It was me. Same jacket, same tired eyes, same startled expression. Except the version of me in the road looked soaked, like it had just climbed out of a river. The car stopped inches from it. Silence. My breath came in ragged pulls. I stared over the steering wheel, unable to look away. The soaked version of me lifted one hand and pointed, past itself, toward the fog beyond. Then it turned and walked into the white. The figure in my back seat said softly, "That's one of the ways." I whispered, "One of the ways?" He leaned forward slightly, and in the mirror I saw his eyes catch the dashboard light like black glass. "There are several," he said. "Tonight has more than one door." My body shook with adrenaline. "I don't want any door." "And yet," he said, "you were going to pick one without knowing." I didn't understand. Not fully. I didn't want to. But the road ahead began to slope downward. A gentle decline, and I knew that decline. The bridge was coming. The old bridge. And the fog here was so thick it hid the guardrails, until you were nearly on top of them. I remembered an accident from years ago. Someone who went through in a storm because they'd taken the curve too fast, and the road had been slick. People said they didn't even see it happen. Just a splash, and then nothing. My hands started to sweat. "Slow down," the passenger said. I did, easing off the gas until I was crawling. The fog shifted, revealing the faint outline of rusted beams ahead. The bridge. My headlights found the guardrail at the last second, and I stayed centered, breathing shallowly, inching forward. Halfway across, something hit the side of my car. Not hard. A thud, like a body bumping metal. I jerked the wheel, almost overcorrected, and felt the tires kiss the edgeline. My heart lurched so hard I tasted bile. "Steady," the passenger said again, firmer now. I stared straight ahead. Another thud. Then another. The sound came from the passenger side like something was walking alongside me in the fog, tapping the car as it went. I didn't look. I couldn't look. I focused on the far end of the bridge, the darkness beyond, the promise of solid road. The tapping quickened, almost playful. Then, as I neared the end, it stopped. The silence was worse. When my tires finally left the bridge, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The passenger behind me spoke again, almost conversational. Now, he said, you get to keep going. I whispered, why? A pause. Because you'll remember, he replied. And remembering changes what you do next time. My throat tightened. So, you're saving me? He gave a soft sound that might have been a laugh if it had any warmth. I don't save, he said. I collect. The fog began to thin as if someone had opened a window in the world. Trees became trees again. The road became road. And as the normal night returned, my car felt lighter. I looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. No shape, no folded hands. Just the fabric seats and the faint impression of someone having been there, like a shadow that hadn't fully lifted yet. My phone chimed. The GPS map refreshed. The voice said, "You are 5 minutes from your destination." I drove the rest of the way in silence, hands trembling, refusing to look away from the road. When I pulled into my driveway, my porch light was on. I don't remember turning it on. I sat there for a long time with the engine idling, listening to it hum, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined everything. Then I noticed the passenger side window. On the outside, traced through the fog's leftover moisture, were 4 words written in a neat, careful hand. Not tonight, not yet. The first time I heard him, I thought it was the radio. I was driving a familiar route, an old state road that ran through long stretches of trees and empty fields. It was the kind of road you take when you don't want to be seen. No cameras, no traffic, just black sky and the steady rhythm of the yellow lines passing under your headlights. I'd worked late. My brain felt soft around the edges. I had the heater on low and the radio barely loud enough to keep me from drifting off. That's when I heard the whisper. It didn't come from a speaker exactly. It came from everywhere at once, like the inside of the car had become a throat. Too quiet, it said. I turned the radio down even further, thinking maybe it was a late-night DJ mumbling into the mic, or a station bleed. The whisper continued anyway. Too easy. My hands tightened on the wheel. I glanced at the radio display. The station name was gone, just a blank line. I tried changing it. The tuner jumped, numbers flickering too fast to read. Then it stopped on a frequency that wasn't even a station. Static hissed, and in that static, the voice sharpened. "Don't change it," it said, almost amused. My stomach went cold. I muttered, "Nope," and clicked the radio off entirely. The car became quieter, but not silent. Because the voice didn't go away, it moved closer. Not physically, there was nothing to see, but the sound of it became more intimate, like someone leaning in from the passenger seat. "You always do that," it said. "Turn things off. Pretend it helps." I stared at the road and forced myself to breathe. "Who is this?" A soft chuckle. "You know." My skin prickled. "I don't." "You do," it insisted, patient, like it had all night. "You just don't like saying it." I passed a reflective sign on the right. Mile 6. I don't know why that number stuck in my head. Maybe because it was bright against the dark. Maybe because the road ahead seemed to narrow after it. The voice said almost gently, "This is the part where you stop pretending." I whispered, "Leave me alone." It laughed again, and this time, the laugh sounded like it had edges. "Oh, I've been alone plenty," it said. "I'm not asking you to keep me company, I'm just checking in." My throat tightened. Checking in about what? The car's dashboard lights flickered. Just once. But it was enough to make my heart stutter. The voice said, "About that deal you almost made." I felt my blood drain from my face, because years ago, in a moment of despair I'd never admitted out loud, I'd sat in a parked car and said words into the dark that I thought didn't matter. Words about trading anything for a different life. Words I'd justified as meaningless because no one answered. Except, what if someone had? I said, barely audible. That wasn't real. The voice hummed like it was tasting the sentence. It was real enough for you, it said. You meant it. My hands shook on the wheel. I didn't sign anything. A pause. Then the voice said, people always think it has to be paper. I passed another marker. Mile 6 again. I stared at it as I went by, and the fear that had been creeping up my spine went cold and solid. The road hadn't turned, I hadn't looped. And yet that marker was there again, like the night had reset. The voice sounded pleased. There it is, it said. Recognition. I whispered, what is happening? You're staying with me for a minute, it said. Just a minute. I like mile 6. I pressed harder on the gas, as if speed could rip me out of whatever this was. The engine responded, but the scenery didn't change. Trees stayed trees. Fog gathered low in the ditches. The road ahead looked the same, like a copy-pasted strip of darkness. Then, the headlights caught something ahead. A figure on the shoulder. At first I thought it was a pedestrian, which made no sense out here. Then I thought it was a hitchhiker, which made even less sense. As I got closer, I saw the figure was standing perfectly still, facing the road with hands at its sides. It wore a suit, not a rumpled real-world suit, a clean, sharp one, like it had been tailored and pressed for this exact moment. Its head was slightly bowed. When I passed, it lifted its face toward my car. I caught a glimpse through the fog and headlights, just enough to see that its smile was too wide. The voice inside the car sighed, content. Pull over, it said. My whole body rebelled. No. The voice stayed calm. If you don't pull over, it said, you'll keep driving mile 6 until your tank is empty. My eyes darted to the fuel gauge. The needle was dropping, not slowly, dropping like a countdown. I felt a tight, ugly panic in my chest. What do you want? Just a conversation, it said, soft as velvet, and maybe an acknowledgement. Another mile 6 marker flashed by. My brain buzzed. My breath came too fast. I didn't want to pull over, but the idea of running out of gas here, with the voice, with the figure in the suit waiting somewhere in the fog, felt worse. I eased onto the shoulder. The moment the tires hit gravel, the car's engine sputtered. Not dead, just uncertain. Like it was listening. The voice said, almost tender, "There you go." I stared at the empty road ahead. The fog moved in slow curls like smoke. "I'm not making a deal," I said. "Good," it replied. "You already did." My stomach flipped. I whispered, "When?" The voice took its time. "You offered," it said, "and I accepted. The only reason you haven't felt it is because I'm patient. I let people forget the moment they volunteered. I felt tears sting my eyes from fear and rage. I didn't mean it. You meant it enough," it said. "You meant it when you thought no one could hear you. That's the truest meaning you'll ever have." The figure in the suit appeared in my side mirror, not approaching from behind, just there, standing at the edge of the fog, as if the shoulder had placed it for my benefit. It raised a hand, not a wave, a polite invitation. I couldn't breathe. The voice whispered, "Open the door." I shook my head violently. "No." The voice's tone didn't change. but the air in the car tightened, like pressure in a sealed container. "If you don't open the door," it said, "I'll open something else." My dashboard lights flickered again. The radio, even though it was off, popped on by itself. Static. Then a familiar sound. My own voice recorded. My voice from years ago, shaky and desperate, saying those words into the dark. I felt nauseous. The voice in the car said, "You hear that? That's consent." I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to block it out, but the sound stayed in my skull. Then, softly, the voice added, "Here's the truth. I don't need your soul. I just need you to believe you gave it away." My hands dropped. "What?" I whispered. The figure in the suit took one step forward, now visible through the fog in my windshield. It didn't walk like a person. It glided, weightless, like it was being pulled. The voice said, "Belief is the lock. Fear is the key. You hand me the key every time you say my name like it's power." I stared at the figure. It smiled wider. I realized suddenly, sharply, that everything in this moment was engineered to make me surrender. The looping mile marker, the draining fuel, the static voice recording, a performance, a trick, a con. And something in me hardened. I swallowed and said, steadying my voice, "You're not the devil." The air in the car went still. The figure stopped. The voice inside the car went quiet for half a second, like it hadn't expected resistance. Then it laughed, but the laugh sounded strained now. "Oh," it said. "And what am I?" I met my own eyes in the rearview mirror, forcing myself to stay present in my body, in the car, in reality. "A liar," I said. The fog outside shivered. The figure's smile twitched. I continued, voice shaking but louder. "You feed on fear. You need me to agree. That's why you keep asking." Silence. Then the voice turned sharp. "Say my name." "No," I said immediately. The word felt like grabbing the steering wheel in a skid. "No," I repeated. The dashboard lights steadied. The fuel needle stopped dropping. In the fog, the figure in the suit blurred like it was losing focus. The voice hissed, low and angry, "You don't get to leave." I put the car in drive. The tires crunched over gravel. The figure in the fog lunged, not running, not walking, but suddenly closer, like the distance folded. I stomped the gas. The car surged forward. My headlights flashed over the figure's face, too smooth, too eager, and then it was behind me. The fog thinned like I'd broken through a membrane. And there, bright, clean, undeniable, was a new mile marker. Mile 7. My whole body shook with relief and horror. The voice was gone and the radio stayed off. The road looked like a real road again, with imperfections and curves and the honest randomness of reality. When I finally reached home, my fuel gauge was back where it should have been. I sat in my driveway for a long time, listening to the normal tick of the cooling engine. Then my phone lit up with a single notification. No app icon, no sender. "See you at 6. Everyone in my town had a version of the story. They told it like a joke when they wanted to scare someone new, but their eyes always did something careful when they said it, like they were trying not to invite attention. Don't drive Hollow Road after midnight. If you do, don't stop. If you see the lantern, don't follow it. And whatever you do, if you hear your name, don't answer." I didn't believe in any of it. I believed in fatigue, deer crossings, and bad cell service. I believed in how your brain can fill in shadows when you've been awake too long. So when my coworker dared me to take Hollow Road home after closing, I laughed and said sure, because I didn't want to be the person who was scared of a story. I left the parking lot at 12:18. The main road would have taken 25 minutes. Hollow Road cut it to 15. The entrance was easy to miss. A narrow turnoff marked by an old sign that leaned like it was ashamed of its own name. The letters were faded but readable in my headlights. Hollow Road. The trees swallowed me almost immediately. They grew close on both sides, and their branches reached over the road like fingers, forming a canopy that ate the moonlight. My headlights skimmed over bark and leaves and the occasional reflective eye of an animal deep in the brush. My phone lost signal within a minute. No service, no map, just me and the road. I drove slower than usual, not because I was scared, but because the road was narrow and damp. The air felt heavy, like it had been holding its breath. That's when I noticed the smell. Smoke. Not car exhaust. Not a distant campfire. This was sharp, sweet smoke, like burning herbs and old wood. I rolled my window down a crack. The smell got stronger. Then, up ahead, my headlights caught a flicker of light between the trees. A lantern. It wasn't on the road. It was in the woods to the right, bobbing gently like someone was walking with it. My first thought was that someone's car had broken down, and they were using a lantern to find something. My second thought was the story. If you see the lantern, don't follow it. I kept driving. The lantern kept pace with me. Not in a way that made sense, because it was in the woods, weaving between tree trunks. But it stayed parallel to my car, like it knew the road better than I did. I told myself it was an illusion, a reflection, a trick of angle and speed. Then it moved closer to the road. The light slipped between trees and emerged in the ditch, just beyond the shoulder, bright and steady now. My stomach tightened. I didn't speed up. I didn't slow down. I tried to keep my breathing even, because fear makes you do stupid things like slam brakes in the middle of nowhere. The lantern drifted along the ditch, just out of reach of my headlights, and then the voice came. Soft, clear, right outside my window. "Hey," it said. I jerked my eyes to the right. Nothing there but trees and darkness and the lantern's glow. The voice said again, closer, "Hey, you're lost." My throat went dry. I didn't answer. I stared forward and kept driving. The lantern's light brightened, as if whoever held it had lifted it higher. The voice turned sweet, coaxing, like someone trying to calm a skittish animal. "Just stop for a second," it said. "I can show you the way." I gripped the wheel until my fingers ached. The road ahead dipped into a hollow, and the air grew colder. My headlights caught mist rising from the ground like breath. The lantern floated up onto the road. Not carried, not held. It rose gently and hovered in the center of my lane, forcing me to slow. My heart hammered. I eased to the left, trying to pass it. The lantern drifted with me, staying centered in front of my hood like it was magnetized. I tapped my horn. One short beep, more out of frustration than anything. The lantern's flame didn't waver. The voice right by my ear now whispered my name. Not the casual way people say your name. The intimate way, like it had been spoken in 100 private moments. I felt my jaw clench. "Don't answer." I kept my lips closed. The lantern floated lower, closer to the hood. I could see the glass sides now, smudged, old, etched with faint symbols that looked like scratches until you stared at them long enough. The voice said, still gentle, "You don't have to be scared. I know what you need. I didn't want to look, but my eyes flicked to the passenger seat anyway, just for a second. And the second my gaze left the road, something appeared in the corner of my vision. A shape in the passenger seat. Not fully formed like a person, more like a shadow that had learned the idea of a body. It leaned toward me, and I smelled the smoke again, strong enough that it coated the back of my throat. The shape's voice was right inside the car now, no longer outside the window. "Let me in," it whispered. I snapped my eyes back to the road. The lantern was gone. The lane ahead was clear. I hit the gas immediately, tires spraying damp grit. The trees blurred by. My heart didn't slow. In my mirror, I saw the lantern again, not on the road anymore, but deeper in the woods, watching me, following, keeping up like it didn't need to obey distance. I drove for what felt like 10 minutes, then 15, then longer. Hollow Road should have ended by now. It didn't. The trees stayed the same. The darkness stayed the same. Even the curve of the road began to feel familiar, like I was looping without ever turning around. Then I saw a landmark I recognized. A dead oak on the left, split down the middle by lightning. I'd passed it earlier. My stomach dropped. No, not possible. I hadn't made any turns. But there it was again, exactly the same, like the road had copied itself. The voice returned softer now, almost sympathetic. "You can keep driving," it said, "or you can accept help." I whispered, barely moving my lips. "This isn't real." The voice laughed quietly. "Oh," it said, "it's real enough." My headlights caught something ahead. A figure standing in the road, holding the lantern. Finally, a person. The figure was tall and thin, wrapped in a cloak that seemed to drink light. The lantern's glow lit up hands that looked too long, fingers tapering into darkness. As I approached, the figure raised the lantern slightly like an offering. I slowed without meaning to. The closer I got, the more the air inside the car felt thick, like syrup. My eyes burned. My thoughts came slow. The figure spoke, and the voice was the same one that had been whispering to me all along. "Stop," it said. "Just for a minute. You're tired. Let me take the worry." The road behind me was just darkness. The road ahead was blocked. I felt trapped, boxed in by trees and fog and a story I'd laughed at. Then, from somewhere deep in my memory, I remembered the last part of the warning nobody ever emphasized, because it sounded too weird. If you hear your name, don't answer, because names are invitations. I pressed my lips together, took a shaky breath, and said nothing. The figure's head tilted. It took a step closer. The lantern flame leaned toward my windshield as if it was being pulled by my breath. The figure whispered my name again, slower, stretching it like a thread. I did something I hadn't planned. I turned on my interior light. The dome light snapped on, bright and harsh, flooding the car with ordinary yellowish illumination, exposing every cup holder crumb, every smudge on the dash, every human detail. The world outside the glass looked darker by comparison. The figure recoiled. Not dramatically, just a subtle hesitation, like it didn't like being seen clearly. I spoke, voice shaking, not answering the name, not giving it what it wanted. "I'm going home," I said. The figure stayed still. The lantern's flame flickered for the first time. The voice hissed, no longer sweet. "You can't leave without giving something." I swallowed hard and did the only thing I could think of. I rolled the window down 1 inch, just enough for cold air to rush in, and I spit the words out like stones. You don't get my name. The lantern flame bent sideways, as if hit by wind. The figure's cloak rippled like a shadow in water. And suddenly, the road ahead was clear again, empty. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the gas and drove straight through where the figure had been. The car didn't hit anything. No bump, no resistance. Just a sudden rush of cold, like I'd passed through a patch of fog that didn't belong to the world. Then the trees thinned. The canopy opened. Streetlights appeared ahead like a row of normal stars. Hollow Road ended abruptly at a stop sign that had been there the whole time, right at the edge of town. I pulled onto the main road and almost cried with relief. I drove home fast, hands trembling, checking mirrors constantly. When I finally got inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I tried to laugh at myself. Tried to tell myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, imagination. Then my phone buzzed. Signal returned. A single text message came through from an unknown number. No contact name, just one line. Thank you for the ride. And beneath it, as if typed slowly, carefully with patience, I know your name now. If you ever see a set of taillights in a blizzard that never gets closer, don't follow them. I learned that on the worst night of my life, somewhere between a dead gas station and mile marker 19. When the snow started falling sideways, like the sky was trying to sandpaper the world clean. I wasn't supposed to be on that road. Nobody is, once the county throws the road closed signs up. But my phone was at 3%, my tank was hovering over E, and the GPS kept insisting this was the fastest route home. The storm hadn't looked that serious when I left town. It was one of those lies winter tells, soft flakes, a calm gray sky, until the moment you're too far from warmth to argue. The first thing I lost was sound. The tires stopped sounding like tires and started sounding like fabric being torn. The wind wasn't a gust anymore, it was a constant pressure, like an ocean pressed against glass. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the white, and outside that tunnel there was nothing. Not darkness, not trees, just nothing. Then I saw the taillights. 2 red dots ahead, steady and low. Not brake lights, just taillights, like someone driving slow and careful. Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. Another car meant the road was still real. Another car meant I wasn't the only idiot out here. I eased forward. The dots stayed the same distance away. I sped up a little, still the same. I slowed down, still the same. It was like chasing the end of a hallway in a dream. I blinked hard and leaned toward the windshield. The lights weren't smearing like mine would through snow. They were crisp, perfect circles, and they didn't bob or drift with the road's curves. They just hovered at the same height, same spacing, as if nailed to the storm itself. I told myself it was just perspective. Snow does weird things. Your brain panics and starts inventing patterns. That was when my radio turned itself on. I didn't touch it. My hand was on the wheel, knuckles white, and the dial was off. But suddenly the speakers crackled with a station I didn't recognize. No music, no DJ, just a faint hiss. And behind it, a voice. Not words at first, just the rhythm of speech, like hearing someone talk through a wall. Then clearer. Mile marker, 19. My throat tightened. The voice was calm, almost bored, like someone reading weather updates. Visibility near zero. Do not travel. Turn around while you can. I swallowed and whispered, "Okay," even though no one could hear me. The voice continued. If you see a vehicle ahead of you and it does not get closer, do not follow it. Pull over. Stay in your car. Do not look outside longer than 3 seconds. A laugh burst out of me, sharp and ugly. What kind of... The radio cut to dead air. The taillights ahead brightened. Not like braking, like they were being turned up, glowing deeper red until they looked almost wet. And then my engine sputtered. It didn't die, not yet, but it coughed like it had swallowed snow, and my dash lights flickered. The heater fan slowed. My phone screen went black. The world seemed to lean towards stillness. I slapped the steering wheel. Come on, come on. The taillights didn't move. They waited. A mile passed, or 5. It's hard to measure time when the world is all white and your body is all adrenaline. At some point, the road closed sign appeared, half buried, like a warning that had given up. I should have stopped right there, turned around, gone back to town, and slept in my car behind a diner. Instead, I kept following those lights, because when you're scared, you'll take any illusion of guidance. Then I saw the mile marker, a skinny post on the right shoulder, 19. The second my headlights hit it, the taillights ahead snapped off like someone pinched a candle flame. My chest seized. No, 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 no! I coasted forward, squinting into the storm, trying to find them. Nothing. And then, right in front of my hood, a shape rose out of the snow. Not a person, not an animal. More like a door frame, 2 vertical posts with a crossbeam on top, made of black wood that shouldn't exist on an empty highway. It stood in the middle of the road, tall and thin, and the snow didn't stick to it. The wind split around it as if it had weight and authority. Hanging from the crossbeam was something that swayed slightly. At first, I thought it was a tire. Then my headlights caught the curve of an arm. A body. The figure was bundled in winter clothes, hood up, boots dangling inches above the road. The face was hidden, but the shape was wrong. Too stiff, too symmetrical, like it had been arranged. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded, tires useless on the ice, and my front end slid sideways until I stopped at an angle, the headlight beam slicing across the hanging figure's chest. A strip of reflective tape gleamed on the jacket, like something a road worker would wear. A county jacket. My mouth went dry. The body lifted its head, and I didn't see a face. I saw a patch of darkness inside the hood, deeper than night, as if the storm had punched a hole into itself. And from that darkness came a sound that wasn't a voice, but wanted to be. A wet inhale, like someone breathing through packed snow. I remember the radio warning. 3 seconds. 1, 2. I jerked my eyes away, staring at my dashboard, at the shaking needle of my gas gauge, at my own hands. 3. Something scraped along the driver's side door. A slow, careful drag, like fingernails on metal. I held my breath. I didn't look. I didn't move. The scraping stopped. Then came a soft knock on the window. Polite. Like a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. Knock, knock. I stared at the frosted glass, heart slamming. A voice, muffled by snow and glass, whispered, "Hey! Hey! You got a light?" My breath turned to ice in my lungs. It was my voice. Not like my voice. It was me. My tone, my little stutter on the H sound. The exact way I'd say hey when I didn't want to be a bother. Another knock. I'm freezing out here. Open up. The handle on the door twitched. Once, twice, like someone testing it. The lock clicked. I didn't touch it. I swear to God I didn't. But the lock popped up all on its own, rising like a finger from a grave. My hands flew to it and shoved it back down. I pressed my palm over it, shaking. Outside, something chuckled, soft and satisfied. Then the whisper came again, closer to the glass. You followed the lights. That means you want help. I squeezed my eyes shut so hard I saw stars. Go away! The chuckle turned into a sigh, like disappointment. The scraping started again, moving toward the front of the car, then across the hood, slow and heavy. The suspension dipped slightly as if something had climbed onto the engine block. Snow fell from my windshield in sheets. A shadow moved across the glass, blocking my headlights, and I felt something press its weight on the roof above me. The metal creaked. The whole car shuddered. And then above the wind, I heard the faintest sound, the click of a seatbelt in the back seat. I froze so completely, I thought my heart might stop. Another click, another seatbelt, like invisible passengers settling in. My rearview mirror was a blur of darkness and snow. I couldn't see the back seat clearly, but I didn't need to. The air in the car changed, thickening, like a room filling with cold water. A voice behind me, right by my ear, whispered, "Drive." My foot hit the gas without permission. The tires spun, grabbed, and the car lurched forward. The hanging figure in the black frame slid out of my headlight beam, swallowed by white. I didn't stop. I didn't think. I drove. The road straightened. The storm eased, just a little, and through the thinning curtain of snow, I saw taillights again. 2 red dots, waiting. And now, in my rearview mirror, faint and steady, I saw another pair of lights. Inside my car, where my back seat should have been empty, the listing said Cozy Winter Retreat, which is realtor code for, "You will die here and no one will find you until spring." I should have listened to the part of my brain that hates optimism. But rent was due, the city was loud, and my friend Kyle swore his uncle's cabin was the perfect place to reset. The snowstorm rolled in the second we got there, like it had been waiting for us to commit. By dusk, the driveway was gone under a smooth white sheet. The trees around the cabin wore heavy snow like cloaks. The only sound was wind pushing through pine needles. A hush so complete, it made our laughter feel obscene. Kyle hauled in firewood, complaining about his hands. I found the fuse box and tried to reassure myself that a cabin with electricity and plumbing couldn't be that isolated. The moment I flipped the main breaker, every light in the cabin blinked once like a warning, then steadied. "See," Kyle said, we're good." That night, the first knock came at 2:13 a.m. Not loud, not frantic, just 3 slow taps on the front door. I sat up in bed, instantly awake in a way that felt unnatural. The cabin was pitch black except for moonlight bleeding through the curtains. Kyle snored in the other room. 3 taps again. I lay still, listening. The wind could throw branches, snow could fall off the roof. But this was deliberate, evenly spaced, patient. I climbed out of bed, took 2 steps, then stopped because I realized something I hadn't thought about since the drive. There weren't any other cabins out here, not within walking distance. That was the whole point. The taps came again, closer somehow, as if the sound wasn't traveling through air, but through bone. I grabbed my phone. No service, of course. The doorknob turned very gently. I backed away, stomach tight. A voice spoke from the other side, muffled but clear enough. "Hello? Anyone inside? I'm lost." The voice was a woman's, calm, exhausted. I stared at the door like it might bite me. My eyes drifted to the window. The curtains were thin, but the world outside was nothing but white and shadow. "I saw your lights," the woman continued. "Please, it's freezing." I wanted to wake Kyle. I wanted to pretend we weren't here. I wanted to be a better person than the part of me that was relieved the door was locked. Then I noticed the deadbolt. It was unlocked. I locked it earlier. I remember doing it, twisting the metal, feeling the click. I crossed the room in 2 strides and threw the bolt shut. The sound was loud in the quiet cabin. Outside, the woman paused. Then she chuckled. It was the wrong sound for someone freezing. It was warm, amused. Smart, she said. Can you at least tell me which way the road is? My throat felt tight. Who are you? A beat. I'm Sarah. I got turned around. My phone died. Something in the way she said it, like she was reading a script she'd practiced. Kyle's bedroom door cracked open. He shuffled out, hair a mess. What's going on? I held a finger to my lips. Outside, Sarah sighed. Please. I'm not asking to come in. I just need directions. Kyle whispered, Is there someone out there? I whispered back, Yeah. He moved toward the window. I grabbed his arm. Don't. He frowned like I was being dramatic. Dude, she could die. The taps came again, now on the window beside the door. Tap, tap, tap. Kyle flinched. Okay, yeah, that's weird. I stayed frozen. We don't open it. From outside, Sarah's voice softened, like she was trying a different angle. I can hear you. I know you're in there. Just talk to me. Kyle called. Where are you? I can't see you. The voice answered immediately. Right here. Kyle leaned closer to the curtain, and for a second the moonlight showed a pale shape on the other side. An impression, like someone pressing a face gently against the glass. Not a face. A smooth oval with no features. Just a faint depression where a mouth should be. Kyle stumbled back, swearing. The voice became sharper. Don't be rude. I'm right here. The doorknob rattled. Harder now. Kyle's fear flipped into anger like a switch. He grabbed the fireplace poker and moved toward the door. Hey, back off. We're calling nobody, I said, because we couldn't. Kyle yanked the curtain back to look outside. I grabbed for his wrist too late. The window filled with white swirling snow. No shape, no person, no footprints. Just untouched drifts piled against the glass. Kyle stared. Where is she? Right as he said it, the voice came from behind us, inside the cabin. Here. We both turned. The hallway to the bedrooms was dark, but in that darkness stood a figure in a long winter coat, hood up, hands at her sides. She didn't move like someone who had just walked in from the storm. She stood perfectly still, like she'd always been there. Kyle raised the poker, voice shaking. How did you get in? The figure tilted her head, slowly, like she was curious about how we worked. Then she spoke, and her voice wasn't the woman's anymore. It was a chorus of small sounds layered together, whispers, laughs, breath, trying to imitate speech. You locked the wrong door, it said. The lights flickered. The fire in the fireplace dimmed for a heartbeat, then roared higher, casting the figure in orange light. Under the hood was not a face. It was a hollow, as if her head was a tunnel bored through reality. Snow drifted inside it, swirling gently, like the storm had nested there. Kyle swung the poker. It passed through her like smoke. The figure didn't react. It only stepped forward, and the air grew so cold, my teeth hurt. My phone in my hand lit up, full bars, bright screen, then displayed a single message in black letters on white. Let me stay. Kyle backed up toward the living room. Nope. We're leaving. Now. He ran for the back door. The figure's head turned toward him with impossible smoothness. A sound like a latch clicking came from the back of the cabin. Kyle yanked the door handle. It didn't move. He screamed and slammed his shoulder into it. Nothing. The windows began to tap every window all at once, like 100 polite knocks circling the cabin. Tap, 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 tap. The figure took another step toward us, and the fire hissed, shrinking as if afraid. Storm's bad, it whispered. Room's empty. Kyle's voice broke. What do you want? The figure leaned closer, and from the hollow of its hood came the smell of wet pine and something old, like a basement that's been closed for decades. Warmth, it said. Names. A place. My mind flashed to every missing person poster I'd ever ignored. Every story about someone who vanished in a snowstorm and was never found. Kyle grabbed my sleeve. We can't stay here. The tapping grew louder, faster, like impatience. And then, from the bedroom hallway behind the figure, a second voice called softly, Kyle's voice. "Hey," it said, "open up. I'm freezing out here." Kyle's face went white. That's me." The figure's hollow hood tilted toward the hallway, almost approving, and it whispered, "See? The cabin fills itself." The motel sign said Birch Hollow Inn in 2 colors, blue and flickering. It sat alone off the highway like it had been dropped there by mistake, surrounded by snowbanks higher than the hood of my car. The storm had shut down the interstate behind me, and the state trooper who waved me off the exit ramp looked relieved to be sending someone else away. "Only place open," he'd shouted through the wind. "Don't go back out." The Birch Hollow Inn smelled like stale coffee and wet wool. The lobby was warm in that way old buildings get. Heat rattling through pipes, air too dry. A woman behind the counter slid me a key without smiling. "No refunds," she said. "I'm not asking," I replied, and I meant it. My room was on the 2nd floor, end of the hall, room 210. The hallway carpet was a faded pattern that made you feel like you were walking through a headache. The only other sound was the ice machine humming like an animal asleep. Inside my room, 2 beds, a heater that clanked, and a window coated in frost. I set my bag down and stared out at the parking lot. My car was already disappearing beneath snow, its shape softening like it was being erased. That's when I noticed the footprints. A line of them crossed the parking lot from the tree line to the motel's back door. Deep, clean impressions. Fresh. And yet the snow between them was untouched. No dragged powder, no smearing. Just perfect prints, like a stamp pressed into foam. I watched, frowning, when another footprint appeared at the end of the line. Not formed by a step, formed instantly, as if the snow decided it had always been that way. Then another. They were walking toward the building without anyone walking. I stepped back from the window so fast I bumped the bed. The heater clanked louder, almost like laughter. I tried to calm down. Storms play tricks. Your eyes strain. Your brain connects dots. I turned on the TV for noise. Static and a weather alert scrolled across the bottom. Blizzard warning. Stay indoors. A knock came at my door. I froze, remote in hand. Another knock, soft, patient. I opened the peephole. The hallway was empty. I waited, counted to 10. Nothing. I told myself it was someone in the wrong room. I went back to the TV. The phone on the nightstand rang. I jumped like I'd been shocked and stared at it. Who calls motel rooms anymore? I picked it up. "Hello?" A man's voice, older, tired. "You in 210? "Yeah." A pause. "Don't open your door tonight." My stomach tightened. "Who is this?" "Room 212, he said. "Across from you. I've been here 3 nights. Storm keeps people longer than they plan." "What do you mean, don't open my door?" Another pause, like he was deciding whether to scare me or save me. "Because someone will knock," he said. "And if you open it, you'll have company." I swallowed. I already heard knocking. "Then don't look out the window either," he said quickly. "And if you hear your name, don't answer." The line went dead. I stood there with the receiver in my hand, listening to the empty tone. I set it down like it was fragile. Across the hall, a door creaked. Soft footsteps, someone moving. I went to my peephole again. A man stood in the hallway, facing my door. I couldn't see his face clearly through the peephole distortion, but he was tall, wearing a heavy coat, his shoulders dusted with snow as if he'd just come in. He raised his hand and knocked. 3 soft taps. My throat went dry. I didn't breathe. He knocked again. Then he spoke, and his voice slid through the door like cold air. "Hey," he said, "it's me. Open up." It sounded like my brother who lived 2 states away. My brother whose voice I hadn't heard in months, except in old voicemails I couldn't bring myself to delete. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the reflexive, "What?" that tried to escape. The man in the hallway shifted, leaning closer to the door. "Come on," he said, still in my brother's voice. "I'm freezing." A faint scratching came from the bottom of the door, like fingernails testing the gap. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall by the window. The TV's static grew louder. The motel room lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied. The knocking stopped. Silence. I stood there trembling, waiting for it to start again. Instead, the ice machine down the hall made a harsh grinding sound, then a thunk, like it had dropped a load of cubes. Then, from the hallway, came the sound of a keycard beep. A door opened, not mine, across from me, room 212, the man who called me. A soft, welcoming voice drifted through the thin walls. "Oh, thank God. Come in." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. There was a pause, then a wet sound, like someone stepping into slush indoors. Then the man's voice again, quieter, confused. "Wait, you're not..." A crack, like wood snapping. A thud. Something heavy hit the carpet outside. I forced myself to the peephole. The hallway was lit by that sickly yellow motel light. Room 212's door was open. On the carpet lay the man who called me, face down, arm twisted wrong. Snow was melting off his coat, pooling darkly beneath him. Standing over him was the tall figure. It turned its head toward my door, as if it could see me through the peephole. And it smiled, not with lips, with the shape of its face changing, stretching into an imitation of friendliness. Then it raised the dead man's hand, pressed it to the wall, and slowly dragged it down, leaving a smear. Letters formed in the smear, dark and wet against the wallpaper. 210. My room number. The figure stepped toward my door. Each step left a perfect footprint in the carpet, but the fibers sprang back immediately after, like the prints were never there. It stopped right outside. I heard it breathe. Then it spoke softly in my own voice. "You don't have to be alone," it whispered. "Just open up." The doorknob turned, and this time it didn't rattle. It rotated smoothly, like someone on the other side had all the time in the world, and the key to every lock. I never liked the basement, but I didn't fear it either. At least not at first. When I bought the house, the inspector called it unfinished but solid. Concrete walls, exposed beams, one dangling bulb in the center, the kind of basement people forget about. I told myself I'd eventually turn it into a storage space. Maybe a home gym, maybe nothing at all. The truth was, I avoided it. Not consciously, I just didn't go down there unless I had to. Sometimes, standing at the top of the stairs, I'd feel this faint pressure behind my eyes, like the air itself was heavier near the door. I chalked it up to old house vibes. Everyone feels weird about basements. That night, though, the house didn't feel old. It felt aware. The power cut out at 12:47 a.m. I remember because I checked my phone the second the silence hit. One moment I was half asleep on the couch, the TV murmuring to itself, and the next, nothing. No hum, no light, no background noise at all. The quiet was so complete it rang. I sat up, listening. Outside, the streetlights were dead too. No cars, no wind. Even the refrigerator, which usually made this faint clicking noise, was gone. That's when I heard the knock. Not loud, not urgent, just two soft taps. They came from below me, from the basement ceiling. I didn't move at first. I told myself it was pipes contracting. Houses make noise when the power goes out. Everyone knows that. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, intentional. Each knock evenly spaced, like whoever or whatever was down there had all the time in the world. I stood up, heart pounding, and stared at the basement door. It was open. I never left it open. The stairwell beyond it was swallowed by darkness. My phone's flashlight barely touched the first few steps before dissolving into black. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello?" The sound died before it reached the bottom. Something shifted down there. Not footsteps, not exactly. More like something adjusting its weight. Like a body repositioning itself on the floor. I should have closed the door. I know that now. But curiosity is a quiet kind of stupid. It doesn't scream at you. It whispers. I stepped closer. The air spilling out of the basement was wrong. Cold, yes, but also damp, thick, and faintly metallic, like rust and old water and something sour underneath. I took one step down. The stair creaked. Below me, something creaked back. Not the same sound, not wood, more like cartilage bending. My flashlight flickered, then steadied long enough to show the basement floor. Footprints. Bare footprints pressed into the dust. They weren't human. Too long, too narrow, too many toes. 6, maybe 7 on one foot. The impressions circled the support beams over and over, overlapping, frantic, then stopped directly beneath the staircase, right under where I stood. The light died. In the darkness, something breathed. Not like a person, no rhythm, no warmth, just a controlled expansion and contraction of air, as if breathing was something it had learned instead of needed. I felt it then, that certainty. I wasn't supposed to be seeing this. I stumbled backward, my heel slipping, nearly sending me tumbling down the stairs. I caught myself and scrambled upward, slamming the basement door shut with more force than I thought I had. Something hit the door immediately. The impact rattled the frame. Dust shook loose from the hinges. The handle jerked violently, twisting back and forth like something on the other side was testing it. Then, slowly, it stopped. I stayed there, pressed against the door, every muscle locked, listening. Minutes passed, then longer. No scratching, no footsteps, no knocking. Just silence. Eventually, the power came back on. Lights flickered. The house resumed its normal noises, as if nothing had happened. I told myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, my brain inventing things in the dark. The next morning, I opened the basement door. Daylight flooded the stairs. The basement was clean, no footprints, no dust disturbances, no marks on the door. Nothing, except for the bottom step. Written into the thin layer of dust were 4 words, carved deep enough that someone had pressed hard. You weren't alone. I moved out 2 weeks later. The new owners called me once. They asked if the basement door was supposed to lock from the inside, and I didn't answer. Because sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the power's on and everything feels normal, I still hear it. Not knocking anymore, just breathing, right behind me. I always hated our basement, but not for the usual reasons. It wasn't damp. It didn't smell like mold. There were no spiders or exposed wires. It was finished, carpeted, and warmer than the rest of the house in winter. My dad used to joke that it was the safest room we had. After he died, my mom started spending more time down there. At first, it made sense. The basement had been his workshop. His old shelves were still lined with labeled boxes, half-finished projects, and notebooks filled with cramped handwriting only he could read. Mom said being down there made her feel closer to him. That was before she started sleeping there. The first night I noticed, I woke up thirsty and passed her bedroom. The door was open, the bed neatly made. I figured she'd fallen asleep on the couch. But when I checked the living room, it was empty. I found her in the basement. She'd dragged one of the old recliners down there and was sitting in it, perfectly still, staring at the far wall. The lights were off except for the single bulb above the stairs. "Mom?" I whispered. She didn't react. I cleared my throat and tried again, louder this time. She slowly turned her head toward me, like her neck resisted the movement. "Oh," she said softly, "I didn't hear you." Her voice sounded flatter, like she was reading a line instead of speaking. I asked why she was down there so late. She smiled, but her eyes stayed fixed on my chest, not my face. "He likes it when I'm here," she said. I assumed she meant my dad. The next few weeks, she started changing in small ways. She stopped watching TV, stopped listening to music. She barely ate unless I reminded her. And every night around the same time, she went downstairs. Sometimes I heard her talking. At first, it sounded like quiet murmuring, the kind you make when you're thinking out loud. But as days passed, it became clearer. She was having full conversations. I'd pause at the top of the basement stairs, listening. "Yes, I remember," she'd say. "No, I didn't forget." I know I shouldn't have." I asked her who she was talking to. She looked genuinely confused by the question. "You," she said. "Who else would it be?" I laughed it off, but the way she said it, so matter-of-fact, made my stomach tighten. Things escalated after the smell started. It wasn't rot or mold. It was metallic, like pennies left in the sun. I noticed it drifting up from the basement vents and lingering in the hallway. One morning, I found her scrubbing the basement floor with a stiff brush, her hands raw and bleeding. "Mom, stop," I said, grabbing her wrists. "You're hurting yourself." She yanked her hands free with surprising strength. "It's not clean," she snapped. Her eyes were wide, pupils slightly uneven. "He can't come up until it's clean." That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time since I was a kid. At 2:17 a.m., something heavy hit my door. Once, then again. Slow, deliberate knocks followed. Not frantic, not angry. Patient. "Open the door," my mother said from the other side. Her voice sounded wrong. Lower, stretched thin, like someone else was pressing it through her throat. I didn't move. "I know you're awake," she continued. "He wants to see you." The handle twisted gently, back and forth, back and forth. I didn't sleep. The next day, she acted normal, made breakfast, asked about my plans, even laughed at one of my jokes. But there was something new behind her eyes. Expectation. That evening, the power went out. The basement light flicked on anyway. I stood at the top of the stairs, heart pounding, watching the glow pulse faintly, as if breathing. From below, I heard the sound of something being dragged across concrete. Then my mother started crying, not sobbing, whisper crying, apologizing. "I didn't mean to," she said. "I was lonely." A second voice answered her. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. It was pleased. Her crying stopped, She laughed. I ran to the breaker panel, flipped switches at random, and the basement light finally died. The laughter cut off instantly. Behind me, something exhaled. I turned around. My mother stood at the end of the hallway, smiling too wide, her head tilted at an angle that hurt to look at. "You shouldn't turn off the lights," she said gently. "He doesn't like being ignored." Her shadow didn't match her movements. I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't come back until morning when sunlight felt like armor. The house was quiet, too quiet. The basement door was open. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw fresh scratches carved into the wall. Tall ones, too high to be hers, and written over and over again in my dad's handwriting, etched deep into the concrete, "Let me back up." I don't know where my mother is now, but every night when the house settles and the pipes creak, I hear footsteps coming from beneath the floor. Slow, familiar, climbing. I tried to convince myself it was over. That morning, sunlight filled the house like nothing bad had ever happened. The scratches on the basement wall were still there, but my mother was gone. No blood, no struggle. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, wiped clean, screen dark. I told the police she'd wandered off. "Grief does strange things," I said. They nodded the way people do when they already have an answer in mind. They didn't go into the basement. I did. I don't know why. Maybe part of me hoped I'd find her sitting in that old recliner again, blank-eyed but breathing. Maybe I needed proof that what I heard wasn't just my mind breaking under pressure. The basement felt different in daylight. The air was warmer than it should have been, thick and damp, like a breath held too long. The light flickered even though the power was stable. Every step I took sounded wrong, muted, swallowed, as if the room didn't want to acknowledge me. The writing on the wall was gone, not scrubbed, gone. In its place was a single phrase carved deep into the concrete, letters uneven, desperate. She let me in. Behind me, the basement door creaked shut. I froze. The handle didn't turn. There was no slam, just a soft, final click. Then I heard her voice, not from behind me, from everywhere. "You came back," my mother said. "I knew you would." The light above the stairs dimmed. The shadows stretched longer than they should have, pooling at the corners of the room. The recliner shifted slightly on its own, leather sighing as if someone had just stood up. "I tried to keep him down here," she continued. Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with regret. "But he missed you." Something moved in the far corner. Tall, too thin. It didn't step forward. It unfolded, joints bending in directions that didn't match human anatomy. The smell of metal flooded the room, sharp enough to sting my eyes. I backed into the workbench, hands searching for anything solid. "My mom wouldn't do this," I said, more to myself than to whatever was listening. A sound like a laugh echoed through the basement. "She didn't," the thing replied. Its voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It vibrated inside my skull, rearranging thoughts as it spoke. "She invited me," it continued. "I wore what she gave me." The light snapped on. My mother stood at the base of the stairs. She looked almost normal. Same clothes as before, same posture. But her eyes were wrong. They reflected the light like glass, unblinking, unfeeling. Her mouth moved half a second after the voice spoke. "I just wanted him back," she said, "and he said he was lonely." The thing stepped closer. With each movement, my mother's body lagged behind it, like a shadow struggling to keep up with its owner. "He remembers you," it said. "He remembers every time you came down here, every time you listened through the door. The memories hit me all at once, standing at the top of the stairs as a kid, afraid of the dark below, feeling watched, feeling called. I had never been afraid of the basement. The basement had been waiting. My mother took a step forward. The sound her foot made wasn't right. Wet. Heavy. I kept it fed, she said quietly, with memories, with grief, with myself. Her smile stretched, skin pulling too tight over her teeth. But it wants you whole. The shadows surged. I ran. I don't remember reaching the stairs. I don't remember climbing them. I only remember the feeling of hands, too many, too cold, brushing my ankles as I slammed the door behind me. The house shook. Something hit the basement door hard enough to rattle the walls. Once, twice, then silence. I left that house that night. I burned every photo I owned of my parents. I moved states, changed my number, changed my name. I never stayed anywhere with the basement. For a while that was enough, until last week. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. The air smelled like pennies, and from beneath my apartment floor, I heard my mother's voice, soft and familiar, speaking from a place that should not exist. "He's ready to come up now," she said. The floor creaked. Slow footsteps began climbing. I never liked the basement, but I told myself that was normal. Every house has a basement that feels wrong, too quiet, too cold, a place where sounds don't echo the way they should. When my wife and I bought the house, the realtor laughed when I hesitated at the door at the top of the stairs. "Old homes always feel creepy downstairs," she said. "You'll get used to it." She was wrong. The basement door was solid wood, painted white, with a brass knob that always felt colder than the rest of the house. The first night we slept there, I woke up at 3:07 a.m. to the sound of something shifting beneath us. Not a bang, not a thump, just a slow, deliberate scrape, like furniture being dragged an inch at a time. I told myself it was pipes. I always told myself it was pipes. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, one bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, pulling long shadows across the walls. The previous owners had left behind shelves, a workbench, and a tall metal cabinet bolted into the corner. No matter how many times I went down there, the air smelled damp and metallic, like old coins and rain-soaked earth. The first thing that bothered me was the door. No matter how carefully I shut it, I would come back upstairs later and find it cracked open just a few inches, enough to show darkness between the stairs and the kitchen floor. My wife blamed pressure changes. I started placing a chair under the handle. One morning, the chair was on its side. That was when I began checking the basement every night before bed. I'd flick on the light, scan the corners, listen. The silence down there felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing against my ears. And sometimes, only sometimes, I felt like the basement was listening back. A week later, I noticed footprints in the dust. Bare footprints. They started at the bottom of the stairs and ended at the metal cabinet. I didn't tell my wife. Instead, I cleaned the floor and convinced myself I'd imagined them. Stress can do strange things. New house, new responsibilities, old fears resurfacing. Then the knocking started. Not from the walls, not from the pipes. From beneath the floor, 3 slow knocks. Always in sets of 3. Always around 3 a.m. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, counting the seconds between each knock. When I finally worked up the nerve to go downstairs one night, the basement was silent, but the cabinet door was open. Inside there was nothing but darkness. No shelves, no storage, just a square hole cut into the concrete floor. The edges were jagged, like they'd been broken by hand. I called the previous owner the next day. There was a long pause on the line when I mentioned the cabinet. "That wasn't there when we sold the house," he said, his voice dropped. "You shouldn't go down there anymore." Before I could ask why, he hung up. That night, the basement door didn't just open, it swung wide. The knocking was louder than ever, echoing through the house, shaking the floor beneath our bed. My wife finally woke up, asking what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. I just stared at the hallway, where darkness spilled out from the open door like a shadow that didn't belong. Something began climbing the stairs. Not footsteps, fingernails. Slow, careful, testing each step. I grabbed a flashlight and told my wife to lock herself in the bedroom. Every part of me screamed not to go down there, but some part of me, deep and buried, felt like it had been waiting for this. The basement light flickered as I descended. The air was colder than I'd ever felt it, my breath fogging in front of me. The cabinet was gone. In its place was the hole, and from inside it, something whispered my name. Not in a voice, but in my own thoughts, like it had always been there. I leaned over the edge and shined the flashlight down. The beam didn't hit the bottom, but I saw hands gripping the concrete walls. Pale, too long, too many fingers. "They buried us," the voice said. "Now, we live between the floors." The knocking stopped. The lights went out. When I came to, I was lying at the top of the stairs. The basement door was closed, locked. My wife was gone. The police searched the house, the basement, the yard. They found nothing. No hole, no cabinet. Just a normal, empty basement. They say my wife left. But every night at 3:07 a.m., I hear 3 knocks beneath the floor. And sometimes, when the house is very quiet, I hear fingernails climbing the stairs, stopping just behind the door, waiting for me to open it. The power went out at 9:17 p.m. Not a flicker, not a sputter. 1 second, the living room was lit by the TV's blue glow. The next, it was just black, thick, swallowing black, like someone had draped a blanket over the whole house and tucked the edges under the doors. Outside, the storm had been building for hours. The kind that doesn't just rain, it presses. Wind slamming branches against siding, thunder rolling so deep it makes your teeth buzz, sheets of water hissing off the roof like the house is boiling. I sat very still on the couch, remote in my hand, listening to my own breathing. Then the lightning hit, and the world flashed white through the windows. For half a second, I saw my living room frozen in that harsh, perfect light. The coffee table cluttered with junk mail, my throw blanket half off the armrest, the hallway yawning like a throat. And in that flash, I saw something else. A smear of wet on the hardwood floor near the front door. It vanished when the darkness snapped back. But my stomach didn't get the memo. My heart was already climbing my ribs, banging like it wanted out. I told myself it was nothing. The dog's water bowl. Condensation. My imagination getting brave because the lights had turned off. I stood slowly, like quick movements might make the house angry. The only light now was lightning, arriving in quick, irregular bursts, and the faint green LED of the smoke detector blinking in the hallway. I stepped toward the front door. The air smelled different. Not just the usual, laundry detergent, the candle I'd burned earlier. There was something sharper underneath it. Cold rain? But the front door was closed, locked. I knew it was locked because I was alone and my habits were paranoid even on calm nights. I jiggled the knob anyway. Locked. Solid. Lightning flashed again. There were wet footprints on the floor. Bare feet, not shoes. Long toes. A shallow heel. And they weren't coming from the door like someone had tracked rain in. They were going to it. Like someone had been standing inside my house, wet to the ankles, and then walked out. The storm boomed so loud it rattled a picture frame, and I flinched hard enough to pull a muscle in my neck. I backed up, eyes glued to the floor, trying to count the prints. They ended at the base of the door. I stared at the deadbolt, at the chain latch, at the edge of the door where it met the frame. Nothing moved, no handle turning, no draft, no shifting shadow. Just the storm screaming outside like it was trying to get in. I grabbed my phone from the couch. No service, of course. Of course, because storms don't just kill power, they kill the tiny comforts too. I turn on my flashlight and the cone of light cut through the dark, catching dust motes and making the wet prints shine like oil. I follow them again, slower this time, and my skin prickled when I realized something else. The prints were spaced oddly, too close together, like whoever made them was walking carefully. Measured, quiet, not drunk, not hurried, sneaking. My flashlight trembled. "Hello?" I called, and my voice sounded small, swallowed by the house. "If someone's in here, I'm calling the cops." A lie, a stupid, loud lie. The storm answered for me with a crack of thunder that made the windows vibrate in their frames. I kept the flashlight pointed at the hallway and tried to breathe like I wasn't about to ruin my own life with panic. I stepped toward the kitchen because the kitchen had knives and because I didn't know what else to do. My bare feet made soft slaps on the tile. Every sound I made seemed amplified, like the house was keeping score. I reached the knife block, pulled out the biggest one, and immediately felt ridiculous. Some suburban horror movie extra. Still, my fingers tightened around the handle like it mattered. I turned back toward the living room. Lightning. In the flash, I saw the back door standing slightly open. Not wide, not obviously. Just enough that the thin line of stormlight cut in, a bright blade slicing through the dark. My mouth went dry. I never leave that door open. Never. It's got a stubborn latch that sticks, and I have to pull it hard to shut it all the way. And now, in the quiet between thunder, I could hear it. A faint tapping, not on glass, on wood, slow, patient, like fingernails testing the surface. I aimed my flashlight at the back door. The beam hit the gap, and the sliver of outside became a sharp, trembling line of rain and blackness. The tapping stopped. I didn't move, didn't blink. The storm shoved a gust against the door, and it creaked wider by an inch. Rain scent rolled into my kitchen, cold and metallic. My flashlight beam shook so badly, it made the edges of the door blur. "Who's there?" I whispered, because my voice wouldn't get loud anymore. Nothing. Then a new sound, soft and wet, like someone shifting weight on a soaked rug. The beam lowered, drawn by instinct to the floor. There were more footprints, fresh ones glossy and black with water, appearing on the tile just inside the doorway. But the door hadn't moved enough for a person to come in. Lightning flashed again, brighter, and for that blink of time the whole kitchen sharpened. The back door stood open wider now, and in the gap I saw a hand, not a whole person. Just fingers curling around the edge of the doorframe, pale and slick, knuckles white with pressure. The fingers were too long, the nails too clean, like they belonged to someone who didn't work with their hands. The hand was inside the line of my flashlight. I made a sound I didn't recognize, half gasp, half choking laugh, and stumbled backward, knife held out like it was a shield. The fingers withdrew instantly, vanishing into the storm dark. The door swung shut with a soft click, not slammed by wind, pulled closed, and then latched from the outside. My brain tried to reject what my eyes had just reported. It tried to file it under wind and panic and shadows. But my body believed it. My body was already sweating cold. I ran to the door and yanked at the handle. It didn't budge. The stubborn latch, my stubborn latch, was engaged. I was locked in. A thud came from the living room. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the sound of something being set down gently. I turned my flashlight that way, knife shaking in my other hand, and took one step, then another, moving like a person underwater. The living room was a cavern. The only light was my beam and the occasional lightning flash that threw bars of white across the floor. On the coffee table, right where my junk mail had been, there was now a candle. One I hadn't put there. It was the same candle I'd burned earlier, vanilla and cedar, but the lid was off, and a match lay beside it like a tiny bone. The candle wick was blackened, still warm. Someone had lit it recently. A low creak came from the hallway. I snapped my flashlight toward it. Nothing there, but the smoke detector's little green LED blinked. Once, twice. The third blink didn't happen. Instead, it stayed off for a long second, then flickered back on. Like something had passed in front of it. Like a shadow had crossed between the detector and its own tiny light. My throat tightened so hard it felt like I'd swallowed a fist. I backed toward the front door, because the front door was my only exit, and because my brain was screaming, "Leave, leave, leave," even though my body was still trying to understand how I was trapped in my own house. I reached the door. I fumbled for the deadbolt. It wasn't where it should be. The deadbolt was turned halfway. The chain latch hung loose, swaying slightly, like it had been touched. I knew then, with the kind of certainty that makes you cold inside, that someone had been standing behind me at some point, close enough to undo the chain, close enough that if I'd turned around at the wrong moment, a whisper came from upstairs. Not a word I could understand, just a breathy shape of sound, like someone exhaling through a smile. I froze. The upstairs hallway was a black mouth above me. I couldn't see the top of the stairs, only the lower steps disappearing into shadow. Another whisper, this one closer. And then, the softest sound of all, a bare foot on carpet. The storm cracked again, thunder detonating overhead, and the lightning flash showed me the staircase in harsh detail. There was water on the steps, drops, spaced like someone was descending slowly, and on the fourth step from the bottom, there was a footprint. Fresh, wet. My flashlight beam wobbled up the stairs, illuminating each step, each dark smear, and when it reached the top, nothing. No figure, no face, no eyes, just the darkness. Until something moved in it, a slow shift, like a person leaning out of a doorway to watch. I didn't wait to see more. I yanked the front door open so hard it slammed into the wall. Wind and rain tore at me immediately, icy needles in my face. I sprinted onto the porch in socks, nearly slipping on the slick wood, and I stopped, because the porch light was on. It shouldn't have been. The power was out. But there it was, glowing warm and steady above my head, humming softly like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. I stared at it, rain running down my eyelashes, my knife still clutched in my fist like a stupid, useless thing. Then, I saw the extension cord. It ran from my porch, down the steps, across the lawn, and into the darkness of the yard, threading between trees toward the street where my neighbor's house sat, dark and silent. Except, it wasn't going to my neighbor's house. It disappeared behind the thick trunk of the old oak tree near the curb, and there, half hidden by rain and shadow, was a small generator, running, purring, keeping my porch light on like a beacon. Like someone wanted me to come outside, like someone had planned for me to. I turned back to the open front door. Lightning flashed, and for one sharp instant, I saw into my living room. I saw the candle on the table. I saw the wet footprints. And in the hallway, standing in the darkness where the smoke detector blinked green, I saw a silhouette. Tall, still. Head tilted just slightly, like it was listening. Then the lightning faded, and it was gone again, swallowed by dark. I didn't go back in. I ran off the porch into the storm, slipping and catching myself on wet grass, the generator's purr following me like an insect buzz. I ran down the driveway toward the street, toward any light, any neighbor, any car. Behind me, my porch light stayed on. And then, quiet as a secret, the front door closed, not slammed, not blown shut. Closed gently like someone was tidying up. The porch light clicked off right after. And in the sudden darkness, the storm felt less like weather and more like laughter. The storm showed up like it had a grudge. It started as a soft, steady rain, the kind that sounds like someone lightly tapping a finger on the window. Then, the wind picked up and the taps turned into fingernails, quick and impatient, dragging down the glass. By the time the first real thunder hit, the whole house felt like it was bracing. I was home alone. Not my parents ran to the store, home alone. More like the kind where the sun had already set, my phone was on 12%, and the nearest neighbor was far enough away that if I yelled, the storm would swallow it. I tried to be chill about it. Hoodie, blanket, TV on low. I told myself I liked storms. Then the power flickered. Not fully out, just that quick, sickening blink where everything goes dead for a heartbeat and comes back wrong. The TV stuttered, the lamps dimmed, the microwave clock flashed 12 o'clock like it had been reset by an invisible hand. I stood there staring at the living room, waiting for my heartbeat to slow down. That's when something hit the back door. Not like wind, not like a branch, a solid impact. Once. Then again, softer, like a test. I froze. The back door was glass with blinds. I couldn't see through it unless I walked close. And suddenly the idea of walking close felt like volunteering. I grabbed my phone and lifted it like it could protect me. Nothing outside but rain and darkness, right? Another hit, harder. The blinds shivered. I forced myself to move, keeping my steps quiet, my eyes glued to that door. I reached the edge of the kitchen and leaned just enough to see. The blinds were closed, but one slat near the bottom was bent, angled slightly upward. Something had pushed it. The storm outside flashed white for a second from lightning, and for that split instant, I saw a silhouette on the patio. Not a person standing upright, more like someone crouched low, right up against the glass. Then the lightning died, and it vanished back into black. I couldn't breathe. My mind tried to reject it. Wind, a shadow, a bush, anything. But there's a difference between something and someone. Your body knows it before your brain admits it. My phone had no service, not one bar, not weak signal, none. It just said SOS in the corner, like it was apologizing. I backed away from the door so slowly my legs shook. The storm groaned, the house creaked, and somewhere upstairs, something shifted, like a footstep on carpet. I snapped my head toward the staircase. The upstairs was dark. The hallway light I usually left on was off because I'd been trying to save power. The stairs looked like a mouth. I stood still and listened. There it was again, soft. A drag, like fabric brushing against a wall. I wasn't supposed to be scared of my own house. I moved toward the living room and grabbed the biggest thing I could find without thinking. A metal fireplace poker. In my hands, it felt stupid, like bringing a stick to a gunfight. Another thud from the back door, this time followed by the faintest sound of nails. Not claws, nails. Fingers, scraping the frame like someone searching for the latch. My stomach turned cold. I whispered, "Go away," to no one, like the house itself needed to hear it. The scraping stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe it worked. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. No signal, no Wi-Fi, but a notification anyway. Unknown. Airdrop. Let me in. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Airdrop only works if someone is close. Like in the driveway close. Like on the patio close. My hands went numb around the poker. The TV popped and the screen went black. Not from power loss, like it was turned off. In the silence, I heard it clearly. A slow, deliberate knock from the front door. 3 taps, not frantic, not angry, polite. Like they knew I was standing right there holding my breath. I didn't move. I couldn't. Another buzz, unknown. Airdrop. I can see you. I spun and looked toward the living room windows. The blinds were half open because I'd been watching the storm earlier. The room behind me was lit dimly by a lamp, and in that reflection, barely like a smear, I saw movement near the glass. Someone standing outside, close enough that their outline warped the wet window. My throat made a sound I didn't recognize, half gasp, half choke. I killed the lamp with a slap, plunging the living room into darkness. The knock at the front door stopped. Everything stopped. Even the storm somehow felt quieter in that moment, like it was holding its breath too. I crept toward the hallway, staying low, trying to think of a plan that wasn't wait here and die. My phone buzzed again, and I almost dropped it. Unknown. Airdrop. Don't turn off the lights. That message did something to me. Not fear. Rage. Like, who was this? Who thought they could stand outside my house and command me? I tightened my grip on the poker and stepped into the hallway. The air felt colder there. The kind of cold that doesn't come from weather, but from absence. Like something had been sitting in the dark for a long time. The upstairs creaked again, one step, then another. Not the random settling of wood, a rhythm. Someone was coming down. Every hair on my arms rose. I raised the poker and backed up until I was pressed against the wall. The stairwell was just a black column. I couldn't see the steps, only the outline. Then a lightning flash lit the whole house for a second, and I saw a shape halfway down the stairs. It wasn't a person I knew. It wasn't even fully human in the way my brain expects. The limbs were too long. The head was tilted in a way that looked curious, like a dog listening. But the worst part, it was smiling. Not a friendly smile. Not even a cruel smile. A smile like it was enjoying how completely still I was. The light died again and it was gone. I didn't wait to confirm it. I ran. Not upstairs, not toward the doors, straight for the bathroom because it was the only room with a lock. I slammed myself inside, turned the lock, and leaned my whole weight against the door. I listened. At first, nothing. Then, soft footsteps in the hall, slow, measured. Like whoever it was wanted me to know they weren't rushing. A hand brushed the outside of the bathroom door. I heard the faint squeak of skin against wood. And then a voice, muffled but close, came through the door. "Don't you recognize me?" It wasn't a normal question. It wasn't said like a stranger trying to calm someone down. It was said like the speaker was offended I didn't already know. My mouth opened, but no words came out. The voice continued, almost playful now. "You looked right at me from the window." My eyes darted to the tiny bathroom window. It faced the side of the house, the one place I couldn't easily see from inside. The storm flashed again and the window lit up. A face filled it, not outside looking in, pressed flat against the glass, like it had been there waiting. The skin was pale and smooth. The eyes were open too wide, unblinking, like it forgot that people blink. Its mouth stretched into that same smile I'd seen on the stairs. And then, as if it was copying me, it raised a hand and mimicked knocking. Tap, tap, tap. On the bathroom window. My whole body locked. I backed away and nearly slipped, grabbing the sink. My phone buzzed again. I looked without meaning to. Unknown airdrop. You can lock one door, not all of them. The doorknob on the bathroom door slowly turned, not yanked, not rattled, just turned gently, as if whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. I could hear it breathing now, a wet, patient inhale through a smile. Then the knob stopped turning, and something else took its place. The sound of fingernails scratching down the door, starting near the top and sliding to the bottom in one long stroke. Like it was measuring, like it was counting the distance between me and it. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to think. The bathroom had no other exit, no crawl space, no closet, no ceiling hatch, just me and a locked door. Then I heard a new sound. My own front door opening. Not a crash, not a break. The soft click of it being unlocked. The slow creak as it swung inward. My stomach dropped. Someone else was in my house now. And whoever was at the bathroom door stopped scratching. They were listening too. For a second, even the thing at the window tilted its head like it didn't expect company. Footsteps moved through the living room. Heavy boots, purposeful. A voice called out, low and urgent, "Hello, anyone here?" A real voice, human. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. I shouted, "I'm in the bathroom, please." I stopped, because the voice downstairs finished its sentence. "Don't move." It wasn't a warning to help me. It was an instruction to something else. The thing at the bathroom door let out a sound that wasn't a laugh, but had the same shape, like air being squeezed through teeth. Then it whispered right through the wood, "Too late." The bathroom light flickered on by itself. I hadn't touched the switch. The mirror over the sink fogged in a spreading bloom, like someone had exhaled onto it from inches away. Letters began to appear in the condensation, not drawn with a finger. Pressed from the other side, like the mirror was thin skin. "We're both in here. My knees gave out. I hit the tile hard, pain shooting up my spine, and the poker clattered away. Behind me, from inside the bathroom, inside the room with me, a voice that matched mine perfectly whispered, "Don't turn around." And the lock on the bathroom door clicked open.